This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show. And it's Thanksgiving week. And that means, hopefully, a lot of you out there are going back to your hometowns, and I'm sure you've all been there, that on the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, it's one of the best nights to go out and have a few beers and reconnect with your high school friends and your middle school friends that you haven't talked to in quite a while. And inevitably, what happens when you do this at the local bar is you have a few beers, you start telling the stories of the glory days. You start talking about that great win you guys had when you were in sixth grade. You start talking about the great comeback victory you had on the football field when you were in ninth grade. And inevitably you tell the stories of when you were juniors and seniors in high school and you finally beat the big rival. And you know what? That bar on that night, on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, is the perfect time to share those stories. That's why we go back to our hometowns. And frankly, it's one of the things that every year I am thankful for, that I can still get together with guys and old teammates that went through those games, and we spent that time together, and we can still get back together 20 years later and still tell that same story of that great game, and it still feels fun and it still feels fresh. That's what today's episode is about. And the story that we're telling today is the story. It's actually the first ever swimming podcast we've ever done here on the Moonlight Graham Show. And it's the story of the 1985 Burnsville High School swimming team. Burnsville, Minnesota had never won a swimming state championship. And then in 1985, they defied all odds. They were the underdogs at the Minnesota State Swimming Championship, and they brought home the gold. We've never done a swimming podcast here, and one of my favorite people in the world is a guy by the name of Don Appleby. And Don Appleby not only was a Division I swimmer, and he's still a competitive swimmer today, but he's one of the great storytellers that I've ever met. And so for our very first swimming podcast, I thought we got to get Don on the podcast to come in and talk about his state championship. Don was on the team back in 1985 of Burnsville. And he brought in one of his teammates as well, a guy by the name of Paul Jensen, who went on to have this great naval career where he was actually a naval diver. And he tells the story about how the 1985 state swimming championships actually helped him in his naval diving career in some traumatic times when he was underwater diving. So I thought that was pretty cool. He tells that story late in the episode, so make sure you stick around for that. So today is our very first swimming podcast, and I think it's appropriate to have it be an olden days high school tale where a couple of buddies that don't get to see each other all that often get back together and talk about the state championship they won 37 years ago. And I was so happy that we were able to bring this story back to life here on the podcast. So I think you guys are going to enjoy it. And if you are traveling for Thanksgiving, if you are going to go back to your hometown, make sure to call up one of your high school buddies. Make sure to call up one of your old-time buddies. Go out, grab a beer, tell the old story. That's what the holidays are all about, not only to reconnect with family, but also to reconnect with those old teammates and tell those stories over again. Have a great Thanksgiving. One of the things we're thankful about here on the Moonlight Graham Show is you, the Moonlighters out there who continue to subscribe to this podcast, who give us 5-star reviews, who follow us on social media, and who listen each and every week. So thank you guys. Thankful for you, and enjoy this week's episode with the 1985 Burnsville High School State Championship Squad. Moonlighters, are you or someone you know moving down to Kansas City? Well, if you are, the one realtor that we trust and yet you need to be calling is the great Brian Sandvig. As you well know, Brian Sandvig is our producer here on the podcast, and there is not a better residential real estate advisor down in the Kansas City marketplace than Brian Sandvig. Call Brian Sandvig, shoot him a text. Hey, DM us on social media. We'll get you connected with Brian if you can't find him on all the socials, but he is there and he is active, and he is your Kansas City realtor, so give him a call. Special treat on the Moonlight Graham Show. I got Paul Jensen to my left and Don Appleby sitting across from me. Gentlemen, we are talking about our first ever swimming pod.
No way.
Here on the Moonlight Graham Show. Paul, Don, thanks for coming on the Moonlight Graham Show.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you for having us, and we're going to try real hard not to be as boring as the sport of swimming. Because really, it's not really a spectator sport, but it is a badass sport, and we had a great time doing it and made some lifetime memories.
We got a story to tell, don't we?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Lots of stories.
So before we get into the story of the 1985 Burnsville High School State Championship, so we're talking about a state championship in swimming that happened 37 years ago.
Ooh.
Why are we talking about this tonight?
Well,
what makes this podcast worthy?
First and last, isn't it?
In Burnsville High School history?
Yeah.
they won after us. No, they won.
When?
Jeff Marshall's team won, remember? Anyway.
They did. All right. We were the first.
Marshall.
Well, certainly.
We were the first.
You have to, Paul, you have to admit, this was a big underdog win victory. So to me, it fits with the Moonlight Graham legends out there of coming from nowhere and actually finishing first in something you were never expected to do. And so we have to get this out.
Well, and that piece of it is what I have taken forward. And I know almost everybody in the picture we're looking at, 6 guys made up the state championship team. And those 6 guys have all gone on to do some pretty incredible stuff.
True.
And I think we all launched from that underdog victory. Hey, there's nothing we can't do.
So what was Burnsville, Minnesota like in 1985? Because I remember the Mighty Ducks, but that was early 90s. I'm younger than you guys, so I remember the 90s is when like the Twin Cities were really popping because Twins won in 91, Twins won in 87, Mighty Ducks come out, the Cake Eaters from Edina in the early 90s. But what was Burnsville? Burnsville's right in that, Twin Cities suburbia. But what's it like in 85?
Have you seen Stranger Things? That's what it was, without the monsters.
Yeah, and also Fast Times at Ridgemont High, only Minnesota version. Right? It couldn't have been more stereotypical 80s. We were upper middle class. Everybody had a future ahead of them.
We hung out at malls. We played pinball.
Yeah.
Galaga. It was exactly what you would think it was. Suburbia, USA.
So Suburbia, USA. What leads you guys to be swimmers in the 80s?
Oof.
Because we've done 230 episodes of the Moonlight Graham Show. We've never done a swimming pod. We've done multiple curling pods, and we've never done one.
All right, hold on. Curling's more boring than swimming.
That's true. No offense, gold medalists that are listening.
No, I'm just...
But
this is actually... what you asked is there's 2 different answers. Like, how are you a swimmer in the 80s?
Yeah.
There's a couple different answers here, right, Paul?
Well, mine is very different than yours.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mine, I came to it by way of frustration and injury. My brothers swam, and I therefore had to go to all the swim meets. They were 8 and 11 years older than me, so I was bored out of my mind. I said, I'm never swimming. Hate it.
Were you a mistake?
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
cut. No.
yeah, a wonderful mistake.
No, wonderful mistake. Jeez, Don.
No, I was the favorite, is what both of my brothers will tell you. And I will gladly admit to that. Yeah, I had it better than they did. But I tried to do all the glory sports, the ball sports, and was okay at those, but never would have been a state champion, never would have made a varsity team in high school, especially not hockey or some of those fortes in Minnesota. So I tore up my knees in soccer in 7th grade. 8th grade, I started swimming because it was about the only thing I could do. And from there on out, I was like, wow, that was one of the luckiest things that happened to me because I actually was somewhat good at that.
Don, you started swimming a lot earlier.
Yeah, so my background's a little bit different than Paul's on the swimming front. So like you, Tim, probably, and like Paul, everyone played all sports. Everyone played everything, organized or not. Everyone knew how to play everything.
That was very 80s.
It was.
Everybody played
Yes.
every season.
And it was what you did, and like I loved baseball, I loved it, but I couldn't hit the curve. So the time comes when you start to decide, okay, what am I really best at, and you start to focus on that. So all the guys on the team, other than Paul, we were all club swimmers from literally the age of 7. So the rest of the teammates here, we were all club swimmers and swam together growing up from early, elementary school through junior high, when we got to high school, we were all teammates together on the same high school team. But after all the other sports go away, football, basketball, soccer, I mean, literally we played them all. Swimming, you just end up having to specialize at some point. Even back in the 80s, Tim, you ended up being, you got to pick one.
Well, because Burnsville is not a small high school.
How about this? My graduating class was 763 kids.
Huge.
Yeah. And we only had 3 classes. We had sophomore at school. We had sophomore, junior, and senior, and it was 3,000 students.
Let me give you another 80s stat from Minnesota, suburbia.
Like
okay, ready?
Hit me.
2 black kids.
Yeah.
763 people, and then it was Jason Bruce, and I can't remember the other guy's name.
There's a lot more diversity in the Twin Cities now.
Oh, huge.
Than 35 years ago.
In fact, it's a very strong Somali community in Burnsville now, and a successful one.
But back then it was not like that. Back
No.
then it was not like that. It was you saw a lot of the same people.
So, was swimming bigger in Minnesota than it is in Iowa because of all the lakes? You got 10,000 lakes up there. There's probably a lot more swimmers in Minnesota than Iowa.
It was, swim or
it.
die. If you're from Minnesota, you know to swim or die.
The thought of swimming has never crossed my mind. Never crossed my mind in Iowa.
Every mother in Minnesota is like, my kid has to go through swimming lessons or they will die, potentially, if they fall off a bridge.
Because you're going to end up by the lake. You're going to be out with friends. You're going to be water skiing, whatever. Yeah,
and was
that's
that
for
you
sure.
guys living on the lakes in the summer?
Totally.
Yeah.
And so every kid had to go through swimming lessons, literally every kid back then. And that's the funny thing is like the guys on this team were so good at swimming lessons, the instructors finally said, I can't help you anymore. Go join the swim team. Go talk to Coach Jeff and join the swim team at age 7.
Not me.
Yeah. You were Paul. So, Burnsville swimming, was it a power program? Like, talk to me about that. Was this the team that everybody wanted to be on the swim team, or were you guys kind of the also-rans in sports even within your high school?
Paul, you got to talk about Dennis Dale here, our coach. We got to talk about our coach because he had significant success before we showed up on the scene with his girls' teams in high school.
And I can tell you, I was there before Dennis and after with my brothers. So my brother Ward, he did not swim for Dennis. My brother Mark swam for Dennis his first year.
Yep.
State qualifier.
Yeah.
That guy.
Yep. Now a lawyer out in Baltimore, and went on to great things as well. But Dennis showed up to a team that was mediocre at best.
The boys' team, because he had 2 or 3 girls' state championships before we did this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But when he first showed up in '76,
oh, right.
He showed up to a program that was like, it was okay. Not a powerhouse.
It was an outlying suburb at the time.
Right. And so he shows up and out of nowhere starts putting people at the state meet. And this was a guy who had been an NCAA champion swimmer at the University of Minnesota. And he showed up and he had a plan and he had vision. And his first successes were, like Don said, with the girls' teams.
So when we got there, Paul, his reputation preceded him as a hardcore winning coach.
Yes.
He must have been pretty young at that time.
Yeah.
Like he probably seemed old to you guys, but Dennis Dale coached like up until just recently here, because after Burnsville he went to the University of Minnesota,
right.
Then he went to Indiana.
Yes.
Legendary Hall of Fame coach at Minnesota, won
Olympic coach
tons
too.
and tons of Big Ten championships.
29 years at the U of M.
Right.
Yes.
So he had to be like in his late 30s or 40s when he was coaching you guys.
You're right, Tim. We didn't think of him as young because he just had that aura about him as a taskmaster. So he was not our buddy. He was the coach.
And he wasn't a young-looking guy. Like he was one of those guys that like looked old when he was young.
So I don't know if you knew this. He coached De La Salle.
Yes, exactly.
For 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm,
and then got his job at Burnsville and coached there for about 12, I think it was.
Interesting to note, he was a military man like you, Paul.
Yeah, but that was like just the very end of the Vietnam era, and
he never got deployed. He was in Germany, and somehow he escaped getting deployed to Vietnam. So he was in like logistics or something in Germany.
Yes, and so he was young. He was in his mid-30s, I think. I think he was 38 when he had that surgery that goofed up his leg.
Yeah, that's right.
So he was definitely under 40.
But he's running the program at Burnsville. You guys are in high school, and you know this guy means business.
Oh,
if
yeah.
we're part of this program, and if we're listening to what Coach Dale says, there's a chance that we could be really good.
Yes.
Was there that mindset, or were you just
Wow.
kids going out for swimming?
Well, I showed up. Like I said, I was pretty new to swimming.
Yeah,
only
you
a
started
couple
in eighth
years.
grade.
Eighth
Donu
grade.
here was swimming with the guppies.
Yep. And then, so ninth grade, we were able to go from Metcalf Junior High School and Nicolet Junior High School. We would then, right after high school, go junior high, go up to the high school and swim with the high school team. And I had no idea. I was doing that because it was a chance to do a sport where I thought I could have some success, and it was one of those many things you just did. Remember, we talked about everybody did every sport all the time. But when I showed up, I swam in the JV lanes. And so I didn't have that kind of vision. I think you knew more.
I like where Tim's going with this, though, because if you're a swimmer, Tim, you are a swimmer. Okay, that's it. You're a swimmer, and you're known. That's how you're known. Like, oh, there goes a swimmer. That's a swimmer.
Well, it's
look at his chlorine bleached out hair. Dude's a swimmer.
And let me add also, when you hit high school, if you're going to be any good, you're going to swim year round.
Well,
you generally are going to swim summers. You're going to do sessions. You're going to put the yards in, and you're known for that sport.
A very good point. At that point of your sports, whatever you're doing, it's a full-time, year-long commitment. There's no breaks, really. There's a couple breaks at the end of the spring season, end of the summer season. That's it. Otherwise, Tim, you're in the pool every day except for Sundays.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's almost to me like a mix of running, cross-country track, whatever the connection is there, along with wrestling. Because it's like wrestling, it's its own thing. If you're not a wrestler, you don't get it. They work out in a weird room. They wear weird headgear. It's like its own little club. Swimming's the same way.
We were that weird, Tim. We were that weird.
Speedos. You're practicing at weird hours in the day.
Yes.
You smell like chlorine all the time, but you got to get the miles in. You got to be in the pool.
Let me give you this interesting analogy there. I love that you brought up the wrestlers, because we used to love it when they would send football players, baseball players, people after they hurt their knee or got hurt, send them into the pool, get some conditioning, let them work out a little bit without all the impact, right? They were all a bunch of flapping pussies.
That's me.
Except the wrestlers.
Okay,
the wrestlers showed up, and they were the dudes who put in time. So it is pretty similar, right? They're the dudes that, if you're going to wrestle, you're a wrestler. Yep. And you're on the mat. You're running sprints. You're losing weight. You're whatever, oddball thing they do. So there is a nice analogy there.
And no one knows what a wrestler goes through except a wrestler, and no one really knows what a swimmer goes through except for other swimmers. So you're right. It's that special.
Well, I'm looking at your old practice plans. Don, you sent them over. And so there's morning workouts. That was always the thing with swimmers, is like, oh, man, you got to get up in the morning. You got to get in the freezing cold pool, whether you like it or not. You're wearing the Speedos. Like, as a high school guy, is there any point where you're just like, screw this? I do not. What am I doing here? I don't need to be doing this.
The hardest thing, Paul, help me here. The hardest thing about a workout was actually jumping in the pool to start. Once you started, it was like an engine. You just go.
You can actually look this up. There's a YouTube video of Olympic swimmers, and they talk about it. Every one of them says it. Oh, the worst part of the day? Oh, yeah, when you jump in the pool.
Diving in.
You just don't want to do it. You've seen that video.
Oh, yeah. It
is true for every single swimmer. You're like, oh. I remember you used to do it. I used to jump in a pool just feet first.
You were the
drop.
last in, bro.
Last one in. Anything I could do. I was usually chasing my wife, which I met in high school.
Jennifer.
And but you would do that running thing. You were just delaying it every minute you could. You'd run along the side.
Yes.
And then dive in. He'd skip that first half a length of
anything. Anything to mentally get over that hump of getting in the cold pool. Because the pools that we swam in, the water was cold purposely, because you can't do a 3-hour workout without it being cool water.
Did you guys have swimming role models at this point? Like, is Mark Spitz your guy?
Well, there was a magazine called Swimming World. That was everyone's access to what was going on in swimming at the time. So everyone subscribed to Swimming World. Maybe not Paul, but we would we would share it around. So we knew we would track the Olympians, but Tim, that was such a different level. Like, Olympic swimming is such a different level. You knew who they were. You saw them every 4 years. Once in a while, you'd cross paths with them, but it was pretty rare that you would have a swimming idol. Like, no, back then, we didn't talk about Mark Spitz. We were just trying to get through the next workout, Tim.
Well, and to that point, that's probably why this was such a big deal. Because to you guys, your Olympic medal was this high school state championship.
Oh, man.
I can back it up just a little bit, though. My first year, I showed up, I swam JV lanes, and I had success. I got better at every meet. And that felt good.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the year, I was like, yeah, I'm going to swim again. That was awesome.
Right.
I dropped like 10 seconds.
Yeah,
Those first years, you can drop 10 seconds.
Can you explain the lane hierarchy?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I swam with Puff. He was the cream puff.
Hold on. We had 6 lanes. It was not a big pool.
Yeah,
We had 6 lanes. And 25 dudes on the team, so it was packed.
Yep. But the first 3 lanes were JV, and the last 3 lanes were Dennis's lanes, right? And it was serious business in Dennis's lanes. You could get away with screwing around a little bit, and I did a lot of that. And because I was a pussy in practice. I readily admit it. And when Dennis, I think it was about my senior year when he said the first time to me, he said, Mr. Jensen, you fancy yourself a racehorse, not a workhorse. Get in the pool, right? And that was his thing. He couldn't stand that I wouldn't put in the yards. But my first year was where I got hooked. I didn't have a role model. I just liked getting better. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the things about swimming that I think is like running, right? You can be on the cross-country team, and if you keep getting better, well, that's the draw.
The more you run, the better you get.
Right. So it's similar that way.
And it would structure the workouts by putting folks who were the same speed or near that in the same lane. So there was a hierarchy. The fastest swimmers were in lane 1. Next fastest in lane 2. You'd rarely trade out. And so if you moved up a lane, Paul, that was a big deal.
Now, I moved up from lane 5 to lane 1
that
eventually.
Was a big deal.
And that felt good. Well, guess what? Dennis did that to me. Dennis, I spent 30 years in the Navy as a Navy diver and explosive ordnance disposal technician. And I graduated I retired as an 06, right? I will tell you, Dennis was the greatest leader of humans I ever met.
Wow. That's a statement.
Yep.
And look, we had good coaches on the club teams. We had very talented coaches, very good technicians, very good. They were just excellent coaches for age group swimmers, right? For young kids and everything. But by the time we hit 9th, 10th grade, Dennis's way of doing business in the pool, it was super structured. It was very goal-oriented, and you knew what you were doing, and you didn't. He had such a commanding presence on the deck with his freaking multiple stopwatches around his neck, doing, organizing 3 lanes at different times on different sets at the same time. He organized himself that you just did what he said.
You did.
You followed orders. I mean, honestly, Paul, it was like being in the military, even though...
Oh, it was. You had 12 guys, say, all running different intervals, and he knew every one of them for 3 hours straight.
Yeah, exactly. It was crazy how he kept control of this stuff and just kept the discipline. No one messed around. You did exactly what you were supposed to do.
Well, let me ask you a question, though, as an outsider, because we're comparing it to running or wrestling. Big difference in swimming is there's different events in swimming, like different strokes.
Right.
Almost like in track, like one guy runs backwards, one guy's rowing the karaoke because you're doing butterfly and breaststroke and the crawl and
Four strokes.
freestyle and,
Four
the
strokes.
backstroke. Right? So at what point do you start specializing, or does Coach Dale figure out you're good at freestyle? You're good at backstyle?
Great question.
Well, it's my job.
Because he knew when he showed up.
Don was a freestyler.
Yes, always.
Still is.
I didn't have any idea.
Right.
Because I was new to it at that point. But at the end of my freshman year, I dropped the most time in the breaststroke. And Dennis Dale basically came to me and said, "You're swimming in my lanes next year. Let's get serious."
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I guess I'm a breaststroker.
And what year was that?
That was my freshman year, and then it was going to be
going into your sophomore
year. Right?
It is kind of true that there might be a body type on certain strokes. So, like, Paul was strong and thick, and a lot of the skinny, taller dudes did freestyle or backstroke. So there was kind of a body type that lent itself to being really good at butterfly, or like Paul being really good at breaststroke.
Yeah, you think about like Zechmeister, Ludgate, me, butterfly, breaststroke, etc. And then you got Billy Asmus, you, other people. Yeah, there's definitely a body type.
Yeah, it's interesting looking back, like thinking about that. You could tell you're a breaststroker. I mean, you could almost look at Paul and say, "Oh yeah, breaststroker." What a stud!
So let's set the stage here. Before we get to 85, let's talk about the end of 84. So end of 84, Burnsville makes a state tournament or swim meet. You got 7 qualifiers in 84.
Yeah.
Craig Dismaris.
DeMarais. Craig DeMarais. Demo.
Mike Kovich. So those 2 must have been the seniors from that group.
They were the seniors.
And then you had Paul, John Schmeling, Don Appleby, John Bordy, and Brett Bussey.
That's us.
So the bottom 5 there we'd see again in 85 with the addition of Rob Marshall.
That's right.
And interesting, I think, about that is our whole goal that year, at least
84?
as I remember it,
Yeah, right.
was to make state.
Right. Different expectations.
Yeah.
Right. It's because you didn't just go to state. You had to qualify
Right.
with a certain time, which was a really aggressive, fast time. You had to qualify.
Still is.
Yes.
So
Purposely.
Yeah, making state, there's state qualification times that are set by the state each year. They probably stay the same, might tweak it a little bit.
There's a formula.
And so you know that at the start of the year. Here's
Yes,
what it's going to
correct.
take to
They're
make
published.
the state meet.
Yep.
Yeah. In track and field, this is how I ran track.
Mm-hmm.
And so that used to be the way it was in state track in Iowa. It's different now. Now it's based on what districts you get sent to, and you just have to win the district or whatever get to state. So that's still the case in swimming?
Yes. My daughters just finished up high school swimming, and yes, there were state qual times.
Yeah, and if you think about the Olympics, to qualify for the Olympic trials, so USA swimmers, there's an
A standard and a B standard.
Well, there's one standard Olympic trial cut. You have to make a certain time to even go to Olympic trials, and it's insanely fast. So I think it's always been that way from the top down. If you look at swimming and historically an amateur sport, right?
Yep.
Olympics being the top of the food chain, it trickled down. That scheme trickled down.
So 84, you guys both swim in the state meet along with 3 other guys that would be with you in 85.
And my victory that year was I qualified for state. Rock and roll.
You get 22nd. You get 22nd.
Right, that's right.
That's right.
Does that do anything for you? Were you happy with that?
Oh, yeah.
You know, as juniors, what do you...
It was more individual, Paul, what you were saying. You qualified. I placed in the 200 and 500 way better than anyone expected. So it was like a thing about... It was more individual that year. Do you remember?
Do you remember what place you got in 84?
Yeah, I do. I was sixth.
Do?
I was 6th in the 200, and I think I was 10th in the 500.
Yeah, because I don't even remember what place I got in 84. I just remember I made it there, and that was awesome.
And
Dennis,
placing top 6, though, go back to the whole 6-lane pool, because we competed in 6-lane pools.
Yep.
If you were top 6, that was big time.
Yep.
You're in the finals.
Yep,
You're in the finals, Tim. That's
that
right.
is true. So that would stick in your head better. But the deal is, Dennis, that great leader of humans, and I mean it to be that kind of vague. He could lead anyone. He could lead DeMarais, and no one could lead DeMarais.
Oh, he had a
that was an odd guy. But he would make it so that you had these goals you never really thought you were going to make, and if you did, that was your victory.
How do we set goals? This is interesting to me. Looking back on how did we do this? Like, how did we get so fast at the end of the season?
Well, for him, it was he understood swimming better than anybody I've ever met, period.
From a technical standpoint or from a...
Technical?
How to push kids, or what do you mean by that?
Technical, physiologically.
He had it all.
Psychologically, he got it, man. It was innate for him.
Technically superior for sure.
Yeah.
Knew how to put in and structure the workouts to... During the season, there is an ebb and flow to this season of training. Knew how to train correctly. Put us through significant weight training in the freaking weight room. Paul was a monster in the weight room.
Nobody trained weights like we did in the 80s. There's one that's a standout. No one did weight training like we did.
That was interesting. So you've brought some of that information, and one of the things that Coach Dale said with your weight training, this is 85. People think weight training is a brand new thing, or, nobody was doing this. But Coach Dale was saying, we expect you guys to lift every other day.
Yeah.
And we expect your reps and your weight to go up every time you lift.
Oh, and
that was stated in your handbook.
Right. Paul, did we keep stats every Saturday? So we did weights Tuesday,
Saturday.
Thursday, Saturday, and we recorded our weight stats Saturday. So Saturday was a test. It was the test day.
Yeah.
And every week you recorded the results. It was incredible. And the stats
he
are right
says
here.
Right in there. The more you lift, the better you are at lifting, the faster you'll swim.
Yeah.
And that was my race day. in the weight room. I
we
went
would-
in there just. I would go home and puke on Saturday.
It was so much fun though because you're on dry land, so you
Yeah.
can talk to each other,
Yeah.
and we would play music in the weight room. So we were jamming,
Right.
the Van Halen.
Yeah.
I mean, we were getting crazy in the weight room.
Right, but he motivated me that way because he knew I
That's what clicked with you.
was a racer, and
What-
so he would poke at me all the time if I didn't do another sit up or do
And you had the record for sit-ups. Was it 30 seconds timed?
30 seconds. Yeah,
And you had the record every year for the most amount of sit-ups in 30 seconds. I think that year we won, you had 32 or 33 sit-ups in 30 seconds. It was like a cartoon.
incline sit ups. Yeah, that was and he would
Incline sit-ups.
and he
Incline.
would watch me. He would mess with me too. It was great. I mean, I look back on it and it's like he just, it's crazy how many things he did that I took forward and used. And looking back on it, it's like, how did he know?
True.
Because he didn't talk to him the way he talked to me.
Right.
Every swimmer had a program with him.
That's true, Paul, but we would observe you lifting sit-ups, whatever the drill was, and you can't not be inspired by seeing somebody go crazy in 30 seconds doing sit-ups, and you're like, I want to get there, I want to do that. Or maybe I could get 27 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
What's Coach Dale do for you guys after the 84 state meet where you collectively placed 22nd to set the stage, to fire you guys up, to set the goal for 1985, which would be your last year?
My last year, not his.
Yeah.
So I'm a year behind Paul.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, he was a junior that year.
yeah, Paul's a senior. Well, maybe to just thinking back on the year that was going to be, we knew we were good. We knew we had talent. But just to, like the teams that were perennially good,
Edina,
Yeah,
Park Center, Lakeville.
all the favorites are still the favorites. And you're like, you look at these guys who you kind of knew through club
They
teams.
still are today.
I know.
So you're right. That's a big deal.
But trying to grab that high, like folks that were winning all the time, it's like, well, that's them. That's not us. So really, when we started the season, Paul, it's just like, hey, let's get in the pool and work as hard as we can and have fun. Tim, it was social. It was the thing to do. We hung out with each other every day. Weekends, parties, pizza parties. We were always together. So we were buddies first, Tim. We were buddies.
And another way to answer it is, what did he do differently? How is he going to motivate us for
Right.
that year? Same as the years before.
Nothing
We were
changed.
going to get better.
Nothing changed.
And that was the piece, right? It was like, you're going to go faster. You're going to get stronger. Let's see how good we can be.
Was there any talk amongst you guys like, hey, let's try to get top 3 this year. Let's try to get top 5. Or do you even
Never.
talk about
Never.
placing?
It was, let's swim as fast as we can. Let's have fun doing it. And if we do what Dennis says, we're going to be good or really good. That was about it, man.
Why wasn't there more depth on the team?
Well,
Just 6 guys.
Burnsville was not a huge town. It was a big high school, but everyone played hockey, bro.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so
So hold on, 85. They won football, hockey, girls basketball. There was a whole bunch of. I mean, every glory sport soaked up all the athletes.
But Paul, there was depth on the team. There was. So we had, notwithstanding the 6 that qualified for state, there was the next 6 to 10 guys who were good, who were good and contributed. Mark Carlson, Steve Thompson, Dave Snapko, all these guys contributed to what we were as a team in dual meets or invitational meets. They were all good enough to place and win points in those types of meets. And so they were our brothers. They were there for us. They swam on our relays with us. So if Robbie did 2 individual events and couldn't do the last relay, they'd put in Snapco. And you know what? He kicked ass. He flew.
That's a good way to. That's a very good way to break that out. There was a lot of depth on the team for dual meets, for sectionals. Ended up being there were 6 of us that went to state. I don't think that was very representative of the depth on the team.
That's true, because the guys that placed at sectionals, we won sectionals by a long shot.
Yeah.
All those folks won points at the sectional meet leading up state. They just simply didn't get the state qualifying time, Tim.
Got it. But the other top contenders, the Edinas, the Park Centers, the Lakevilles, I'm guessing they had more than 6 qualifiers.
Yes, and they had stronger club teams that had longer histories.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just a piece of that. But, I don't know. I didn't feel like we didn't have depth.
And maybe that wasn't a good question. I mean, you guys know it better than I do, but when I see only 6 guys at the state meet and you guys win the title.
Oh, it looks like that from the outside for
Yeah.
sure. But I don't feel like.
I think a state swim team's going to have up to 10 guys, depending on how many.
But you're not going to have 15.
Depending on the relays, correct.
No.
Because of just there's a limited number of events.
Yeah, and a limit. Yes, exactly.
And you're going to run your best guy or swim your best guys in those events.
Yes.
Yeah. So we know Paul's a breaststroker. Don, you're a free. Did you guys do other events? Like, what were your backup events throughout the year?
We did every event. And Dennis made us do every event. So some of the dual meets where we're swimming lesser teams, we would swim our off events. So Paul might do the backstroke or 200 free or 200 IM. He would throw you in any event.
It was all torture.
He would throw me in the 100 butterfly. We rotated events to just kind of keep it lively. So again, to me, this was Dennis' master stroke as a coach. Don't put you in the same event every meet, Tim. It was not like that. He would rotate. In fact, if you look at the dual meet stats, and we were crushing Blake or Breck or Henry Sibley, we're crushing these teams. The last event, the 400 free relay, he would put the team in as a exhibition and not score points. So it was like a time trial, and we would purposely not score points in that last event to give the other team the quote-unquote victory in that event from a point standpoint. He was that good of a mental tactician.
That's a cocky move.
No, it wasn't. It was respect. It was the opposite. It was the opposite. It was a respectful move.
Yeah.
So he would put them in as an exhibition and not pile. He was not running up the score. It was respect to the other coach, who he knew all the other coaches. It was respect.
But you're still winning.
Yeah, we still
like
won.
Everybody knows who won.
We had won the meet, but on paper, it looked like, okay, Sibley got another 10, 12 points.
Right.
And it was a total respect thing to other coaches.
And he would put kids that normally swam JV on the varsity relay team. He did all kinds of stuff like that was pretty incredible. But, I think back now on all the games he played with making me swim the 200 IM or the 500, right?
Yes.
And if I pushed out in it, he says, well, you're swimming that again next meet. And I was like, but I want to swim the 100 breast against that guy I want to beat. And he goes, well, I guess you should have put out in the 200 IM.
Oh, my.
Right? You remember that.
I do.
Are you guys shaving the heads, shaving the armpits, shaving the legs? Like, is this an all hair go thing? How's that work in swimming?
I really just did it because my girlfriend was into it, but no, I'm kidding. No, you did, and that was a special thing. And everybody, I think most people believe it's because you take the hair off and you take all the drag off, and really it's about the feel.
But you have to clarify that. You only did that. You could only do that once or twice at the end of the year. So you would not, you purposely, when you trained, you wore 3 swimsuits to create extra drag. You didn't shave down during the season because it wasn't required, and you didn't do that. So you would save that thing until the very end of the season for the top meets. So when it came to sectionals and state, that is when you shave down. And Paul would shave his head bald. We would shave with a razor.
You'd go no swim cap and just go bald head?
Yeah.
Well, I did my junior year just for psych, and then Dennis basically told me, he says, you can shave it if you want to, but you're wearing a cap because that's actually better.
That's true.
I was like, all right. So I had a mohawk, a pointer mohawk. But remember, some guys also would grow a beard. Gordy Westerberg grew a beard.
Oh yeah,
during the season.
You want to drag during the season.
Spitz had a mustache.
Yeah.
When he swam.
That was a different era. That was 70s.
I know, but I'm just saying, it has been done before.
Right.
It has.
Right. It has, but it was really a feel. It was the way it felt, and it was a psychological hit, and it was what you did for the meet you wanted to do the best in.
So when you were shaved down at the end of the season for the big meet,
you felt fast.
Yeah, when you would dive in the water, it's you can't hardly even explain it. You felt differently because there was no drag or no sensation. You felt, honestly, I felt like a frog, you were on top of the water. It felt like you were another foot higher than you really were. There was a weird sensation that made you go faster.
And I actually asked Dennis about this after I think my junior year. I said, should I do something different on my on my inside of my arms, right, and stuff. And he admitted that it's a feel point for butterfly and for breaststroke in particular, the way you pulled through the water, and it was more than just shaving the hair off. It was a psych, it was a feel, it was everything. So it's strangely, it's a very, obviously it's only swimming that does it, right? Well, cyclists do it on their legs, right? But,
Is it fair enough that you shaved everything other than what your suit covered?
Everything except what the suit covered.
And your swim cap.
Mm-hmm. I even trimmed my eyebrows. I did. I put like a clipper. I didn't take them all the way down like, in that Pink Floyd movie or something, but it was close.
On the opposite of that, you actually would let your fingernails grow longer. Remember this?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you touch the touchpad, if you have an extra millimeter, I don't know what it is, you would have the longest fingernails you could. It was weird because maybe you out-touched the guy next to you by 100th of a second. Yeah. This is a real thing.
Well, we've seen that enough now in the Olympics where they can slow it down, and you can see how it would actually matter. Because it can be that close at times.
At that point in the season, everything mattered. So these really little things kind of came out at that point.
And it's fascinating, too, because you go from, large concepts like 10,000 yards a night.
Yeah, we would our workout.
And then you go to the point where you're trimming eyebrows, growing fingernails at the end of the season, right? But we put in the yards. And what really, I think the thing that mattered was through the season, weight training, yards, 6 days a week. I don't care if it's a meet night. It's Thursday and you're going to lift. We'd get in the water with rubber arms and feel like crap.
Do you remember what Dennis would say to us preseason with the parents at the parent meeting? You will be at swim practice, and if you're not, you either are dead or dying.
Yeah. Yeah. With no smile.
Dennis seemed kind of like a hard ass. Was there ever a point where you guys... You've seen this in the movie Miracle, right, where the team kind of rallies against the coach. They bond together against the coach because they're like, screw this guy, or were you always all in?
I'm going to say always all in, Paul.
You were always all in. I struggled with it here and there.
Yeah.
Not much, but I remember a little bit here or there going, oh, God, we just stop beating me over the head,
Because the seasons can be long.
We're
talking in the winter.
It's a grind.
It's dark.
Right.
You get dour attitudes. It's cold. It's wet.
Right. And there were a number of kids who quit, and Steve Thompson was a good example.
Well, yeah, and you can't have everyone all in all the time, but there was enough that you towed the line, and if you wanted to gripe, you griped a little bit here and there, but it wasn't pervasive. It never was. And Dennis had a way of bringing you back, too. He had a way of militaristically somehow.
Yeah.
We break you down physically, but then something would happen where he'd bring you back up, and you'd just be... like, wow, that's what I needed.
Every good coach does, right? They have to push you. So they can't be your buddy all the time. They've got to push your buttons.
I'll clarify. I only felt doubt freshman, sophomore year. The results for me were undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
Junior, senior year, I was in. No matter how much it hurt, whatever.
Tim,
just drag myself to the pool and get in and go.
We all improved so much year on year. There was never a point where you regressed or weren't faster than you were before. And so these exponentially better results that you would get, clearly we knew that was a credit to Dennis and how hard we worked together as a team or individually. And so it was like it was hard. It was easy to be all in.
You finish 84, 22nd ranked team in the state. You start 85 because you're returning a lot of good swimmers in 85.
Yeah, we were a unit. We were a unit.
You're ranked number 5 to start the year.
Yeah, preseason, weren't we?
Preseason number 5. You've mentioned a couple of times already, Don, that you're blowing people out at
dual
most
meets. Yeah.
At these dual meets, regular season meets, it's going pretty well. Where's your guys' confidence at as you're entering, the sectionals or, what's the expectation? Are you still not setting out those, hey, we got a chance here? Hey, we want to place top 3.
So there was a news...
Because at some point it has to start creeping into your thought, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
How good you are.
There was a newsletter that came out every week. Remember that with the rankings?
Yeah.
After all the dual meets?
That's right.
And I remember sitting in the locker room when Dennis would bring that into us. It was usually Saturday when we were doing weight training and stuff, and looking at it and checking my events and checking our team. And it was mid-season or so
yes,
when we just kept creeping up to the top. And I was, when I was stayed in the top 5 for the 100 breast, when our relays were in the top 5 for 100 breast.
Right.
And then Dennis started talking about, because you never wondered what direction you were going in. Here's what we're going to do. Here's where we're going to focus. This is what we're going to do this dual meet. This is how we're going to prepare for sectionals. This is why we're going to crush sectionals. This is how we're going to go into state. And then towards the end, it was like, this is how we're going to prepare for state. This is the strategy for state. And then we're all already in. We're like, holy shit.
It's gone exactly like he told us it would.
Yeah, there were a couple big meets during the season. Remember, Paul, we had like the Burnsville Invitational. There was 8 teams. There was the Park Center Invitational, 8 teams. So you got to look at some other teams. And we did really well, except, Paul, for Edina. I believe we got beat by them 3 times that season. Do you remember?
In dual meets or at tournaments?
We got beat by them badly at the Richfield Relays, first meet of the year.
Just relays, no individual events.
They smoked us head-to-head in the dual meet in January. And then the Burnsville Invitational, they won the Burnsville Invite. We were second. We competed hard. It was, it wasn't close, but we were right there. But we're, Tim, when that happens and they're that much like crushing you, it's like, wow, they're really good. We're good. We're good.
But we're
man,
not there yet.
They're really good. There's no way. We're just, I never, Paul, the thought never entered my mind that we were state contenders. Like, I knew we'd be good and up there.
I don't know exactly how or why I figured it out, but it became clear to me that Dennis didn't give a shit about dual meets.
Okay, so
they were just a way and a reason to race and to check your performance level. I don't remember Dennis caring that Edina blew us out.
We talked to him this past week. We talked to our coach this past week, and he did remind us. He said, we never rested for any dual meet.
Right.
We never rested at all. In fact, the Thursday dual meets that we had, we lifted weights and then had a practice before the meet. So we weren't resting for anything.
Right.
He's like, don't forget, we never rested for anything until the end of the year.
Right. So he was always about that. And it's funny because I have actually had, not conflict, but disagreement with some swim coaches along the way for my kids, etc., because they were all worried about a dual meet. And I would look at them and I go, who cares? Sections and state. And they're like, oh, but we need to have a dual meet record. Or whatever. And it's amazing to me how many swimmers care about dual meets. I don't.
There were 1 or 2 or 3 swimmers in the state that would get a state qualifying time before sectional. So the dual meets, you weren't competing for a state qualifying time. That was not the thing.
Right.
That happened. So you're right. It was just part of the training regimen, I think, wouldn't you say?
Yes. But that was how come he was leveled up so much above all the other coaches.
He had a full season plan in place. He wasn't starting and stopping with every dual meet.
Right.
The dual meets were just part of the training to lead up to sectionals and state.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He's a strategic planner.
So going back to one thing you just said there, Don, you could have a state qualifying time at any point throughout the year
to
get you in a state?
Yes, you could.
You didn't have to do it at the sectional meet.
No, it was super rare that any swimmer would achieve that. You're talking like maybe the top swimmer in the state in an event would achieve that before the end of the year.
So these are pretty hard times to get.
Super hard.
Oh, yeah.
Did anybody on your team hit those times before sectionals?
Never.
So all just happened at sectionals?
Exactly.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so
that's pretty incredible, isn't it?
So it's interesting you say that because we kind of bypass what sectionals is. Sectionals is a very high-pressure meet because of that.
Yeah.
So what leads up to sectionals, Paul? How do you get so fast at sectionals? We do shave down, like we said. Yep.
You take off a couple of swimsuits. I think you mentioned that.
Yeah. Oh, and it's funny. They would issue us championship suits, which were 2 or 3 sizes smaller than your regular suits. So they were tight fit.
They were.
That helps out.
But there's a little magic. There's a little magic sauce called taper.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about resting now. So the end of the season, leading up to sectionals, what happens? Because how do you go so much faster? In fact, Brett last night reminded us the state 200 medley relay time. We were 7 seconds slower 6 weeks before that.
That's incredible.
So at sectionals, what happened? How do we do that, Paul?
We would start to taper, and we knew we were near the end.
Yeah.
And Dennis would tell us.
No more 3-hour workouts.
Yeah, but he would tell us, this is what you got to do, and here's where we're at. I'm not going to taper you. This is one of the things that motivated me. He said, you got to make these times. You got to do this. You're still going to be a little bit tired. We're going to start taper, but I'm not going to taper you till state because that's where you need to taper.
But if we were doing 9,000, 10,000 yards a day, we cut it down to 5, 6, 4, 3 at the very end.
How nervous are you guys before sectionals, though, knowing that, hey, if I don't have a good day, I'm not going to state? And you had both been there the year before.
How about this? I wasn't.
Not at all. You just trusted in coach so much.
Yeah, because we've been through this before.
Trust the process.
And I trusted the process. And I was out of my mind with energy coming out of my ears. I was like, you can't stop me.
Yeah,
because
Paul's
I was
right.
rested. I was a racer. I was like, rah! I was vibrating at that point, right?
True. The amount of energy you had saved up at that point, you knew you were going to go faster. It was just a matter of how much, Tim. So you know, I think the best of us knew we were going to make state times. It's just a matter of trusting the process. But still, there's no guarantee, right?
No guarantee.
You got to race fast. You got to swim your swim and see what happens when you look up at the clock and you're like, I made it.
You sent a video of the state meet, and I know this is the state meet. It's not the sectionals, but I got to imagine sectionals, there's almost a different level of anxiousness to it because there's so much on the line, right? State, a lot of people are just happy to be there.
Yes.
Sectionals, you know, people are crying probably getting out of the pool if they don't hit their time, if they had a bad day, if
That's
they're not
very
feeling well
true.
that day. So there's just a lot of pressure. There's a lot of anxiety, all this stuff. You sent this video. One thing that came out to me right away is how loud
Cook Hall was a freak
swim
show.
meet can get.
Yeah.
Well, we probably need to get to the state championship
Well, I want to
meet.
I want to get to sectionals first too because I want to. A couple of things about swimming. I don't think people realize how loud a swim. You know, what do you call it? Just a pool,
It's a pool.
area
Pool.
is like the reverb in there. You got
Yep.
the metal ceilings. You got you know, the tile around the pool. Everything it's just echoing.
It's like
on
an
top
echo
of each
chamber.
other.
Yeah. Oh, it's intense.
And then you get on the blocks and like everybody has to freeze for a second and then beep, you know, it goes.
Yep.
And as a non-swimmer, I'm always looking at it like, I can't believe people don't fall start all the time. Like people don't just fall in the pool because you got to be so nervous standing on that little platform there ready to jump in. Like it's beautiful drama. That's why it's such a great sport to watch in the Olympics because it's so dramatic. The noise, the pressure. Then all of a sudden the PA guy's got to, hey, quiet. We're about ready to go here. And all of that comes to a head, and you have to perform 16, 17, 18-year-old kids almost completely naked, no hair on their bodies, and they got to perform in front of 1,000 people screaming right there. Like, that's a lot of pressure on a 16, 17-year-old kid.
So you talk about what motivates you, how do you keep moving, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And here's one of those differences. That's what got me
You love
jacked
that.
up. So I currently
Being naked in front of everyone.
that too. No, when it was time to race, you're standing behind the blocks, and I used to pop my arms. If you can snap your biceps against your
Latissimus dorsi.
when you're 4% body fat and you're 18 years old, you can do that kind of pow, pop, pop, and I would do it until one or the other guy next to me would look at me. Then I knew. I said, all right, I own your ass. and that's all I wanted was to get on that block and race.
Here's what's crazy to me is all of this training, days, weeks, months of training, and you get up on the blocks for a 1-minute race, 2-minute race, whatever that sliver of time is so small compared to the amount of training you went in. If you look at swimmers behind the blocks, the Olympics or whatever the state meet you saw, they're not that animated. They're in a zone. I'm telling you, when you're behind the blocks, you are ultra focused on the race ahead. There's no going back at that point because you've trained literally a year, Tim, or in the Olympics, 4 years to swim a less than 1 minute race. This is a ridiculous amount of training for that sliver of time you're trying to best yourself in. It's an incredible thing that there's no way you can have a laser focus when you're getting ready and getting on the blocks. There's nothing happening other than you're swimming your lights out at that point.
And that's what I loved. And that's what I think most folks who really got something out of swimming, they all had you loved it. You loved getting on the blocks. And
loved every minute of it.
And you're in your focus because you're going to explode and go, right? Here's a funny thing. Completely unrelated sport, But I feel that same thing, and it's why at 55 I'm still good at it. I road race motorcycles. And when we're at Brainerd International Raceway, lined up with 15 bikes, getting ready to go 160 miles an hour into turn 1,
What?
you start from a dead stop, and you've got a big light in front of you. When that light goes out, you go. And it gets silent in my head.
Yes, that's
Everybody
true.
else around you like, revving their engines, everything else. And I am known for my hole shots, like first guy into the corner. Now, those 25-year-olds run me down. But it's the same mindset. It's the same kind of a thing. It's the same jolt of adrenaline that you get from when that starter's gun goes off.
And when you said how loud it is, seriously, you don't hear it anything. You are, whatever zone you're in, you're that laser focused on what's going to happen next. You don't know anything other than waiting for the starter's beep.
So sectionals, what events did you guys get in?
Say that again.
What events did you guys get into state from sectionals?
That's interesting. So the 6 guys that qualified for state, we qualified both relays, 200 medley relay, 400 free relay. But I think we had a pretty good spread of events, right? Robbie and I had the 200, 500 free.
Yep.
Brett had the 100 free.
I swam the 50 free and I scored points, but I didn't even come close to the state time.
Yeah, but Bordy and Schmaling were in the 200 IM.
Mm-hmm.
Bordy was in the 100 back, so we had a pretty good spread of events. Yep. Paul was in the 100 breast.
Yep.
So Bordy, I think, was in the 200 IM as well.
Yeah, Bordy. That's right. Bordy qualified in the 200 IM.
So you're in a bunch of events.
We had a lot of events. We had a lot of chances to score points at state.
I would say we had at least 10 guys scoring points at sections.
Oh, way more than that.
At least, like in the finals at sections,
Yeah, we dominated. We dominated that sectional meet. We crushed.
But only 6 of us made the cut for state meet.
But none of our main rivals, none of them were in our section. So however they ended up choosing how a section is organized, it was teams we knew, but not the top 5 to 10 teams. We were clearly the favorite going into sectionals, and we proved it.
You talked about tapering. You tapered some going into sectionals. Then what's the taper like from sectionals to state to make sure that the racehorses are ready to rock for state?
So state's 1 week later, and you really are not doing much that next week. You are at the pool. You're at the pool for maybe a couple hours, but you're working on fast starts. You're doing things that you wouldn't normally do.
Technical stuff.
Yeah, you are.
Starts, turns, technique, and you're staying loose.
You do a warm-up set, stay loose. You do maybe a mid-range set, a couple things, but then you do some sprint sets. You do some what we call quality sets. So there's yardage sets and there's quality sets. Quality sets are you go as fast as you can, and there's a lot of rest. So you do a fast 100 as fast as you could, and then you get 10 minutes of rest, which is unheard of.
Do turns, work on turns or something.
Yeah, in the 10 minutes you go do turns down to lane 6.
Right.
So you're not doing much other than quality, Tim. So if you were doing 5,000 a day, you're doing 2,000 that last week. You're doing barely anything to get that energy level up.
And you guys are young. You got fast metabolisms at that point, but are you watching what you eat? Are you eating specific things, or does it matter when you're 17 years old?
That was a science that came later.
Later, but I just always remember, again, Dennis was ahead of everyone else. He would check our body fat by water displacement.
Yeah.
Make us hang on below the diving board.
We had an underwater weight chair.
Right, weight chair. And so we would do it at the beginning of the season, mid-season, and then towards the end of the season. And my senior year, mid-season, I was down below 4% body fat, and I remember after one of the meets during the when the family was there and such, Dennis went up to my mom and said, I would like you to try and get him to eat more often and more quantity. And she had this exasperated look on her face, and she goes, how? He eats all day. And I was a furnace. I literally had food packed in my locker. I ate all day.
We ate all the time. We ate whatever we want, whenever we wanted, all the time.
Yeah.
What a great feeling.
And it was, I added it up one time. It was 8,000 or 9,000 calories, I think, a day.
You could not eat enough, Tim.
Couldn't eat enough.
So it didn't even matter.
No.
Like you're not worried about, hey, let's get a couple more salads in, or like, let's make sure we
There's
protein.
one exception. You remember what it was, Paul? Night before a big meet,
Yeah, we'd have spaghetti dinner.
carbo load.
So
Carb
carb load, similar to like a running.
Yes.
You know, that kind of
Yeah,
idea.
So there
kind of
was a couple of things in there.
Right.
So what's the lead up to state like? We've gone through the practice, but what's Coach Dale doing to get your minds right to perform on the biggest stage?
So the state meet was a Friday, Saturday meet. Friday is preliminaries. So everyone who qualified was seeded by their time in preliminaries. Thursday before state, we shaved on again. I think that picture taken there, that Thursday.
I didn't shave before sectionals. by the way.
Okay, so you shaved only for state.
I shaved for state because he knew I was going to qualify, and he wanted, he played mind games with everyone.
You and Robbie were the only ones he might not have shaved because
Yeah.
the rest of us needed to get those times.
I didn't
at
cut my
sectionals.
hair and I didn't shave for sectionals, and he wasn't even sure he was going to rub me down. And you remember that kid next to me? I can't remember his name, who was all slicked down and they toweled him off.
Yeah.
And then that was one of the stories you and I went over. I ended up beating him, and I was really happy about it. And I had gone pretty fast for, not prepping that much. And I was celebrating at the other end of the pool after the cool-down length. And very nicely, with a smile, he came over and he bent down and he said, "Shut up. Don't give anyone any reason to want to beat you."
Wow.
And I was like, fair enough.
I do not remember that.
Yeah. Because you remember I beat the kid in
Todd Duvik?
That might be. I can't remember his name. He's a big lummox of a dude. He looked like a football player.
Yeah.
But he got up there just like...
Hastings, Todd Duvik.
I think that's right. But it's like somebody had sprayed him down with mineral oil. And they just... The referees just shook their heads, and they called him off the block and toweled him down.
Well, you might want to clarify, what is motion lotion?
Yeah, right.
Is this a thing? Is motion lotion
Yeah, is this like an illegal substance?
Is
Nope.
it? I think it is now, but
They
back
don't
then,
do it anymore, but back then, and Dennis had 3 recipes. It was a combination of mineral oil, alcohol, like rubbing alcohol, and oil of wintergreen.
Like mineral spirits they use to clean
No, mineral
paint?
oil.
Okay.
No, mineral oil.
Don't know
Thick
what that
mineral
is.
oil. And they would rub you down, prep you for it, and you'd get some heat from it.
The wintergreen, Paul. The wintergreen would heat up
heat.
on you like icy hot.
And
it was
the
a feeling of
alcohol
icy hot.
would give you just a feel, and then you'd be slicked down with the oil. But it was like, for me, because I swam breaststroke, they never put any on the insides of my arms and never
'Cause
put
you want
any
the
on the
water to
insides
catch
of my legs. Right?
You'd get a quick rub down of motion lotion before your event, and so you were not only feeling frog-like, but now you were tingling from
Right.
icy hot.
And would this lotion help
Yeah.
you glide through the water better too?
That
Or is
was-
it just more topical to make your body feel good?
Topical and psychological.
Bam!
Yeah.
It was all up here.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just remember distinctly standing there, and I was when they got us up on the blocks, man, I wanted to go. Like I said, I was vibrating.
Ready to go.
And then they called that guy down, and I looked over and I looked at Dennis, and he didn't signal me in any way. He looked at me, and he gave me one of those little smiles.
You were ready.
And
He
I was
knew
like,
you were ready.
I was like, good enough, I got this. And so I knew I had that guy, right? And he swam poorly. I swam well. And then the rest of there was 5 or 6 guys from the team that were at the end of the pool because I had won the event, and it was towards the end of the meet. We knew we were going to win.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I was screaming balls to the wall because that was my favorite song that year from this heavy metal band, Accept, And he just came over, literally shoved everybody out of the way, leaned down, smiled at me, and he said, "Shut up."
Dennis would never accept you showing up other teams in any way, shape, or form. It was you went about your business and you went on to the next race.
Yeah, 100% true.
But-
So that that's mindset, right? Now it's all a mind game. Taper's a mind game,
Right.
keeping you motivated, keeping you feeling good. He would talk about what you ate, and he would talk about. I remember the only time he ever really talked about sleep, Taper.
True.
He'd tell you, get some sleep.
But
Get
Sure is.
some sleep.
taper ends on Thursday night.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Yeah.
all the hay's in the barn.
Yep.
And all you can do is perform on Friday and Saturday.
So it's interesting. Paul remembers this better than I do, but after we shaved down on the Thursday before the state meet, I'm pretty sure it was Thursday, Dennis actually secretly got us into the University of Minnesota championship pool, Cook Hall, for a practice.
It was the Saturday
Because-
or It was the Sunday before after sections
All right.
and Thursday.
Okay, so, yeah, because we were allowed to swim there on Thursday. He got us secretly in a week before, and there's a real reason
like
why.
Hoosiers.
Yes, it was. And the Cook Hall pool was an old pool, very different than the pools we'd been swimming in. Usually you've got, there's a lip of the pool that you can, do your turns on. You can grab the side of the pool. You could not grab the Cook Hall pool because it was straight up for a foot and a half. So it was a flat wall. It was a very different wall. Very strange.
If you think about most of the pools you see today, even the regular pools, YMCA, whatever, they've got a gutter.
Yeah,
grab the edge.
Yeah, and it helps to alleviate the waves and everything else. And then you've got an edge you can catch to help you anchor and move, especially when you're doing backstroke turns and breaststroke turns and butterfly turns, right? Everything except the freestyle turn is a flip turn, right? So to get a chance to go in there and practice turns and just feel what it's like in that wavy pool because it didn't have the gutters.
Yeah.
And I think it was more than a foot and a half. I remember... Well, at the starting block end, it was like 2 feet. The rest of it was at least a foot.
There's no edge to grab.
Nothing
it was
to grab.
high. It was this high
You
thing.
went in flat and had to figure out how to do it. And that was, again, brain game.
Yeah, huge
It was a
psychological advantage.
Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
So the pool. You feel pretty good on Friday. What's the first event? Do you guys remember how the meet starts?
So
first
this would
event that you guys had?
Yeah, this would be preliminaries on Friday. So remember, the preliminaries, they cut the top 12 times for the next day, for the Saturday championship finals on Saturday.
Well, for clarity, everybody who qualified, maybe it was 20, whatever, they're in prelims.
Per race. So there's
and then the top 12 get moved to Saturday.
Yeah.
But Friday, yeah, we're there to do a job. Friday we show up, we're seated pretty well. But so are all the other big teams, the returning champs, Edina. They're there in force, right? They're walking around in their green freaking, arena jackets and stuff.
I absolutely loved the fact that most of the people there from those teams had no idea who I was. And that was partly because I came in late to the game and partly because I got better every season more than most. Like I ramped up pretty hard every year.
Right.
And so even my senior year, nobody expected me to go under a minute in the breast. They're like, who's this guy? He'll go pretty fast.
And it was remember,
and the relays were the same thing. Nobody
True.
expected us to go fast in the relays. They don't have any rock stars.
This is pre-internet, pre-cell phone. No
Right.
one knows each other unless
Right.
you swam on a club team with them or they saw your results in the newspaper, Tim. So they're like, "Oh, there's the 200 freestyler from Burnsville." They don't really know you.
But they had to be seeing some of your times throughout the year.
Absolutely.
They did.
And especially if you guys destroyed at sectionals.
But that was only a week before.
Right.
But remember, Edina crushed us 3 times. No one's thinking about us.
But you were preseason ranked 5th.
Yeah, sure.
The weekly reports that are coming out, Burnsville's right in the top 5 every week.
The teams 4 through 10, anyone could have been in there from that level. They're considered also rans like us.
All that mattered was the top 3.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how'd Friday go?
Friday we swam well. Friday we qualified for finals. We qualified everyone. Everyone who swam prelims qualified for finals in some way. So we did pretty well. We did pretty well in prelims. Little did we know how well we had done.
What do you mean by that?
So after prelims, so we swam well. We're seeded, our seeds.
No points go out on Friday, though,
No.
so you just got to do your job.
All right. So, and you've been asking along the way here, how did you know if you were going to be a championship team? How were you doing during the year? We went into prelims. Dennis told us what we needed to do. He didn't say, this is what you need to do to win. In fact, I don't think he ever said that before Friday night.
Right, true, Paul. And I think the expectation that we each had and that Coach Dennis had for us was, hey, swim a little bit faster, hit your turns, have a fast start, do a couple little things, and you're going to go faster. You're going to go faster because it's a bigger meet. There's more adrenaline. You're more well-rested. You will go, basically, he said, you will go faster.
Mm-hmm.
So he made it seem really attainable.
Very much so.
You
But
knew you were
not-
going to go fast.
But he never mentioned state champions.
Right.
He just said to each of us, watch your turns, do this, your underwater pull and kick on the third length, whatever, right? And you're going to go faster. I think you're going to do well. I think you're going to swim well. And
you know what you're reminding me? He would coach you up for the race. He'd be like,
Yeah.
I think you can take it out a little bit faster. I want your first 50 a little faster. Don't be afraid to get after this. Do it. I want you to go for it here.
My God, he was a technician.
Or in the 200, you really need to improve your third 50. Focus on it. So when you come off the walls, give a little better kick, and just get yourself into a faster third 50. So he would have little tricks to make you start thinking a little bit tactical about your race.
So Friday goes well, but there's no points scored on Friday.
No,
It's all
but
prelims.
No, but it's interesting. So we all pile into the locker room. In fact, Dennis, University of Minnesota alumni, gets us into the U of M swim locker room, which was off limits. He got us in there. We're the only team in there. So we're sitting there, right? We're hanging out. He comes in, he says, well, I've scored the meet for tomorrow based on our preliminary times and places. So if we swim our times tomorrow and the places that we did today, we win. Silence.
First we've heard that from him.
And this is what, Friday night?
Friday
after the meet?
Friday afternoon.
He rolled us into that locker room, and it wasn't a, hey, come on, guys, hey, good job, or anything. It was
none of us said a word except for maybe Johnny Schmaling. I mean, he talked the most. He looks at us. He's like, well, shit.
Right. And he just rolled us into that locker room, had us sit down, and clearly he was going to give us a debrief. He did that after every meet. Again, brilliant tactician.
Bordy just starts grinning. I mean, he's just grinning.
Yep. Because we all swam well.
Bussy's like surprised, like, wow. Wow. Robbie's freshman, clueless. He's just like, okay.
I was out of my mind because I had just gone under a minute in 100 breast.
By the way, our freshman swimmer was our fastest swimmer on the team.
Marshall?
Robbie.
Rock star.
An absolute monster of a swimmer.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in the 200 and 500 free with you.
Yes, and the 400 free relay. Just an absolute freestyle phenom.
And
Out of nowhere.
Swimming.
So out of nowhere, remember when they didn't know Paul? They didn't really know Robbie either. Here comes a freshman who'd never swam sectionals or state, comes flying in. He was a very good age group swimmer, so some people knew him. His age group peers probably knew him a little bit. He comes walking in, and he's placing in the top 6 like that, like top 2. I think he was seated second in the 200 and 500 going into finals out of nowhere. So here's seniors, been doing it forever. Who's this freshman kid? Blew everyone's mind.
So Coach Dale on Friday after the meet said, first time really he's talked about place or expectations all year.
Yes.
He says, hey, this is a chance you can win it.
Yeah.
In fact, the newspaper articles we dug up that we found, his pre-state meet stuff was like, well, we're going to be good. We're gonna place real high, and it was never like we're contending. We're contending, but
Right. We're doing our best.
And we expect to contend somewhere here.
But now he's changed his tune.
Yep.
At the
Clarify, he never talked about placement. He wouldn't say, you're going to win that race. He'd say, you're going to go a 102.9. Your fourth length you need to work on. It was all about your performance. He never talked about whether or not we were going to win the meet, whether you're going to win that race or any of the rest. This is the first time that he has said something like that to us.
Well, what I love about what he did, too, is he just said, if we do tomorrow what we did today, not like we have to do so much better tomorrow or we have to, be our best selves tomorrow. So if we just do tomorrow what we did today, we'll win.
True. And I think if looking back, the strategy that he had, you got to remember relays. The 2 relays were worth double the amount of individual points. So strategically, when he's putting his meet sheets together on how we should do this meet, he knew our best shot at doing this was getting the most amount of points in relays. And so he structured the state meet that way. And so 2 of our guys, Brett and Johnny Schmaling, they ended up doing 2 relays and only 1 individual event, even though they had qualified in multiple individual events. And so the structure of the state meet allowed him to strategize on how can we max out our points.
Why didn't everybody else do that? Because individuals were more focused on individual glory?
Swimming is typically an individual sport. but we lived for the relays.
I got to tell you, I have always thought about this and thought, if there's anybody who should have been embarrassed after the state meet, it's every other coach.
Right.
He crushed them.
Yeah, I don't know if
the coaching is what won it. He went in and figured out how to win the state meet.
Right.
And the rest of them were like, I mean, there were other teams with guys like Robbie Marshall on it. And they're like, all right, well, we got to get Robbie into as many individual events as we can and get him as much glory as we can because he's my star. Right? And it's that individual thought process that lost every other coach the meet.
There may have been, I'm sure there were other veteran coaches there at the meet, but Dennis simply outclassed them.
Outclassed them.
So let's go into Saturday morning. Take me back to Cook. The Cook Pool. What's it called? Cook Hall.
Yep.
Cook Hall.
Cook Hall.
It's still there. It's just not the premier
In, what was this,
March
March
of 85.
Yeah, March 4th or March 4th. There's a date on that, of 1985.
Yeah, I have it right here, Tim. It's March 9th,
March
1985,
9th
Saturday.
Do you remember, can you guys remember back 37 years ago and remember, what that morning was like?
Well, you picked me up to go to Cook Hall.
Are you sleeping in your own bed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, you gotta get rest.
I didn't know if you hotel or I didn't know how that works.
You had breakfast at home. There was no money. There was no money for any of that stuff, no budget for anything. I mean, I don't know why the school let you drive the team van. That was stupid.
It was the 80s.
You literally drove the school van?
Well, yeah. This picture here.
This is the school van.
Yeah. That's an Independent School District 191 van.
So Paul's a team captain, so somehow he's more trustworthy. Yeah.
So this picture I'm looking at, is this before Friday? Is this before Saturday?
I think that was the Friday preliminary van ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we got out of school.
Big time.
Right?
Big time.
And so we
had lunch at Bordy's house.
Yep.
His mom cooked us an Italian meal.
On Friday. Or
on Friday.
Before prelims.
So let's go back. I want to go to Saturday.
Yeah.
Right. So you're picking everybody up on Saturday. What's the tone like? Where's your mind at on Saturday morning?
I actually think Saturday, our parents all drove us to the meet because it's the weekend. So the parents aren't working. Everyone showed up at Cook Hall, University of Minnesota pool, legendary bathtub pool.
Yeah.
Before, you get there and you warm up. So you get there and there's a warm-up time. There's an hour before the meet warm-up time. So everyone does their, basic warm-up stuff, some starts, some turns, a couple of sprints. So we're warmed up, right? The first event is the 200 medley relay. We were seated first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And remember, swim your time, swim your places, you're going to win.
And the medley team is Bordy starts it off with the backstroke. Jensen, you got the breast, you're second. Schmeling is third with the butterfly, and then Bussy is the anchor with the free.
Yep.
First event of the day.
Yeah, seated first. Everyone's gunning for you. Everyone.
Everyone has their eyes on us because, one, we weren't supposed to be seated first. And two, who the hell are these guys? Because he didn't stack it with all of his best swimmers, but he also was very fast with who he chose.
None of these guys were individual champions ever.
Right. And like he said, he's like, well, hold on a second. Schmeling and Bussy, they're only doing one individual event. People were already screwed up with what was going on.
Yeah, what was going on?
So we showed up, and of course, Dennis was, you'll be here at this time, you'll do this, you'll do this, you'll do this. Very regimented, right? So we didn't really have to think about much. Because he made it clear the night before, if we just swim our times, don't screw it up. Get out there and do your job. Be here at this time. So we got there, and I picked you up. We drove there separately. Our families came separate to watch. So we got there, and everybody else came there kind of like that. It was carpooling to a certain extent. But we all
had to be
got
there early. The swimmers had to be there early.
Right. We all got there, had our heads on straight, and Dennis, no more cheerleading. He didn't mention winning it again. He just said, all right, swim your times. Get out here. And then coached each of us on what we were doing. You watch this start, you think about that turn, and we got it going. But I'll tell you, that's that video you saw.
Right.
Was that race.
So there's a consolation heat before the final heat. So there's a consolation heat of the folks who swam 7th through 12th.
Right.
And the console heat scores points, okay, for the team. And, of course, Paul's medley relay was the championship heat, final heat, and seated first. And it went off, and you saw the video, Tim. We were behind, dude.
Yeah.
We were behind. We swam fast, don't get me wrong. Everyone swam fast. Going into the anchor, Brett Bussey.
Came from behind, and like I said, this you got to see this video, and we'll post it along with the podcast here. But how loud it is, and you can just feel the tension in the pool that day. And it's a really great video. It's a cool video, just because everybody's packed in there,
and every
there's
parent,
not spare room for anybody.
That's right.
Every mom, dad, sister, brother,
Yeah.
uncle, grandfather, grandmother, and teammate screaming at the top of their lungs.
My two brothers.
The PA have to get on quiet for about
Right.
15 seconds just to get people to quiet down.
Quiet,
So the
please.
swimmers can hear the gun go off.
Right. My brothers came in from the East Coast, Baltimore and Virginia.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was not uncommon. Lots of people came to watch this.
Standing room only, dude.
And if you ever get a chance to see pictures of Cook Hall, it's like one of those operating rooms, a teaching operating room. It's really steep. The stands.
It's like a surgical observation
Yeah.
room. It's so weird.
So we're there, and I'll tell you, it was more tense than prelims because everybody else swam well, and even though we had faith, even though we knew we were just swimming what we had to, I came in and
Well, Bordy goes off on the backstroke,
Yep.
and Cam Olk,
Yeah.
his team put him in backstroke. He was like 2 seconds ahead of Bordy.
yeah.
Paul jumps in, hauls ass.
But there were some pretty good guys there. So I didn't make up any room. I didn't lose any. I made up a little bit. And then Johnny, he swam well.
Yeah, he kept the pace. We're probably third
Yep.
going into the anchor leg.
And then, Bussey swam really well, and it was the way Dennis built it.
But Bussey's specialty was relays. He swam. He's for some reason the adrenaline factor, whatever it was, he swam faster on relays. He performed the best. In fact, he admitted. Our coach said, "Well, he sacrificed an individual event." Brett said, "No, I didn't sacrifice anything. I knew I was better at relays. I was good with it. I'm cool."
Yeah, he went out like a cannon.
Right.
I mean, he had the lead almost by the turn.
Yep.
And it was pretty clearly over, by 75 meters into his swim there.
Our fastest starter, strongest kicker, Brett, just killed it, and we won that race by half second.
And after that was when I was elated. And not because we had won that event. I was like, we might do this.
Yeah.
Holy shit. It happened exactly the way Dennis said. And I was like, now I'm just riding it high because I'm done until my 100 breast.
You can't have a better start to the day.
Right.
That was incredible, and it was such a confidence boost. Like, okay, everyone did their job, just like we talked about the day before.
Now, think back on it, too, right? Everybody saw us crush it, set a record, and Cam Olk didn't win it for him.
No.
And everybody else kind of looking around like, what just happened?
Park Center's like, oh my gosh, they're for real.
What just happened?
We're
32
32 points ahead of Edina after that event, after the first event.
So that had to give you guys confidence.
Oh, it was.
Yeah, I was
the whole
elated.
team.
The tone is set. So now it's game on. Like,
What's the next big event?
Well, it's followed by the 200 freestyle. So Robbie and I went. We both placed in the top 6, scored a bunch of points in the 200 free. 200 IM. I think Bordy and Schmeling were in the console heat. Scored.
Yeah, Bordy was 12th. Schmeling, I'm not sure what Schmeling got in the 200.
50 free, we didn't have anybody in. Then came the diving break. Neither Edina or Park Center or us had divers, so we didn't lose any points there.
That was key. That was key.
Wait a minute.
None of
they
them had
include
divers.
the diving points with this?
Diving, dude.
It's like, I guess it's like field events in track, right?
Well,
You can have all the best runners, but if you don't have a good discus guy.
The only thing diving and swimming have in common is where it happens.
Yeah.
And so if you have none of us had divers. None of the top teams had divers that qualified for state.
Yeah, because that could throw it really out of whack.
It didn't this year. Okay, good. So after the diving, you got the 100 butterfly. Didn't have anybody in the 100 fly. Bussy in the 100 free scored some points. Robbie and I scored points in the 500 free, both of us in the top 6. Then it was 100 back. So Bordy scored some points in the 100 backstroke. And then Paul's 100 breast event is the last individual event of the state meet.
You got 5th, right?
I got 5th. And it's a funny thing because that's a bittersweet memory for me. I did what I was supposed to do. But the day before, I had swam really well. You know, and here's how important 37 years later I remember the times. 59.16 is what I went in prelims. And that record was a school record that stood for 22 years.
If you broke a minute in the 100 breast, you are fast.
And I got up, and I can't remember which guy was playing mind games, but somebody was screwing around up there and twitching on the block, and he false started, and 4 of us went in.
Cam.
Was it Cam that was twitching?
It's on the video. It's on the video. He false started. You got back then. You got 2 false starts.
Yeah.
You were out after the second one. The rules have changed.
Yes.
Now it's one and done. But back then you could false start, and it could be a mind game.
Oh, totally. And that happened quite a bit. I didn't expect it. I went in the water. I got a little bit cold. It rattled my head just a little bit, and I was pissed. And I don't know that I actually have really told very many people this.
Yeah, I don't remember this.
So I got back up, and Dennis was looking at me, and he did something. You know, he was kind of like, you know, just like take it easy.
Yeah.
Right, and got back up on the blocks. I swam well. I went a 59.78. My time would have gotten me 3rd in the finals if I had swam as well as I did in the prelims. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't like it, and I was fairly bummed out about it. But Dennis, he made it clear. He said, "You swam well."
Yeah. So if you had a good race, this is what you wanted to hear from Dennis. Afterwards, you'd go look at your splits. You'd come over to the side, wherever the team was camped out, and you'd look at your splits. So Paul would have had a 50 split time on the 100 breasts. You'd look at your split times. He'd talk to you about it, and then he'd say, "This is what you wanted from him. Good swim."
Yep.
That was what you wanted, what you needed to hear. And
he commented on
that
the
was
false
good
start.
enough.
He said that false start was unfortunate.
Right. He might have something to say to you that would keep your boost.
But he said, good swim. Right. But I didn't have much time there because the next event was coming up.
Right.
And so I was, but and the funny thing is, you know, for years and years and years, I've used that as a reason to do what I didn't do early enough, to put in that extra effort, to put in those extra yards, to focus, to think, to not get rattled. So I'm working on, and I'm not exaggerating here, but I'm working on a lift balloon on a torpedo in the test range in the Potomac River during EOD school. And it's they get you in a blacked out mask. You're about 20 or 30 foot down. Potomac's a nasty river. And something floats by and bumps me. And I've got this lift balloon, which has a explosively actuated valve on it and 2 tanks. And that's what blows up the balloon and lifts this torpedo. And that's how you take care of these in certain situations. It's one of the tools we had to test out on. And I remember when and it was cold. I had a thin wetsuit on, and it was 48-degree water.
Oof.
So it bumped me. I started freaking out. And I thought to myself, well, there's your false start.
And you could dial right back.
Right.
Huh?
And now is the salty language, right? Because one of the things that was my main advantage at dive school and in EOD school in the Navy was that I had learned how to think while I was underwater and tired and out of breath. Mm. That was swimming.
Yeah.
But Dennis taught me you need to focus no matter what. So the salty language, right? And I remember that. There's your false start. Fucking focus.
Yeah.
And so I got back to it and got through that and came up, and somebody told me that there was a giant stump and tree and root system that went over me. And I said, oh, that's what it was. Yeah, they said, we didn't know if it hit you or what. And I said, yeah, it hit me. All right, how's that related? Well, it's so that performance, even though I was not all that proud of it, I did what I had to do. I didn't cost us anything. I swam well, and it was an early mental toughness learning lesson.
Well, it just goes to show how important athletics are.
Yes.
And how important it is to be put under that pressure,
Yes.
to have great coaches, to have that training. Yes. And, kids, even if you don't win, you miss out on that side of it, right? Because you are so keyed up. You are so locked in. It's the most important thing in the world to you. And then when something rattles you, like a false start, or you didn't do exactly, how do you respond to it? You could have fallen apart.
That's what I was proud
right?
of.
You didn't fall. But
I still went under a minute. I didn't go as fast as I should have. I didn't crumble.
But you're able to use that 20 years later in
right.
dive school.
That's right.
Right? Instead of
big deal.
It crumbling you, right? You build off it. And that's cool. That's a cool story. I appreciate you sharing that, Paul.
It's hard to ignore you setting the school record in the 100 breast in that event and scoring in the top
in
six.
prelims, Donnie.
True. You still earned it, and it was up there on the board for 20-plus years. But you swam that fast and were that impactful and scored that amount of points needed at that time in the finals of the 100 breast. So we collected a lot of points, Paul.
And we did. And another thing I learned from Dennis prior to that was it wasn't really about me. Right? I didn't like how that turned out. He told me it was okay. And so I need to shut up. I need to shut up, focus. We're not done with this swim meet. Let's keep moving. And it was at that time, I never would have expected it to be that valuable a life lesson.
That's great. So last individual race was the 100 breast.
Yeah.
Then what's the next relay?
Wow, so that's the last relay.
And this is epic.
So is this the 4 free?
Yeah, this is a
free?
4x100 yard freestyle. And last event. So it's pretty electric. Remember the consolation finals
this is
go off.
Schmeling, Appleby, Bussey, Marshall.
That's right. So again, Schmeling had not done an individual event, so he could double up on this relay. And he was a fast sprinter in I think actually all strokes. Johnny could do it all. And so he was also the character on the team. I mean, this guy, he kept us loose. He kept us together. He was a drummer. You remember he had a drum kit? You had a bass guitar, didn't you?
Yep.
So we were all...
It was the 80s, right?
Yeah,
we had a wannabe punk rock band.
Yeah.
So we got our little spot on the pool deck, Tim, where we're standing there as a team, and the coach is there and gathers us all in, right? So console final goes off, and the finals championship finals ready to go, and Dennis gathered us. He's like, guys, listen, boys, all we have to do is finish this race and we win. So we cannot false start, because a false start on a relay is easy to do. When the guy comes in to touch the wall, your feet can't leave the block until the dude's fingers touch in the wall. And there were disqualifications a lot on relays. So
because it was also where you made up time.
Yeah, because you could have a fast start. So Dennis said, listen, no fast starts. Boys, I want you to have conservative starts. All you have to do is finish this race. We're in the top 6. Finish the race, and we win the meet. So
last event of the day.
We all look at each other. Everyone nods. Everyone's like, okay, got it. Johnny, you got it. Johnny, you got it? Got it. Brett, good. Robbie, good. So we go off. We're loose. I mean, really, Tim, at that point, you're loose. You're like, okay, the pressure valve is off. Just be smart. Make a conservative start, which is exactly what we did. And so when we talked to Brett this week, Bussey, he was the anchor of the 400 free relay too. So he anchored both relays, right? This is epic. And he's like, I knew before I dove in, I'm going to make the slowest start of my whole swimming career. I knew as I was diving in that we'd already won the meet. So we just finished the race as fast as you can at that point. We actually ended up getting 4th. On the relay. We're seated 3rd, got 4th, which was really good for slow starts at that point. The interesting story was, remember, Edina and Park Center were 1-2. Remember that?
Yep.
Going into the season? So Edina was seated 1st in the relay. I think Park Center was seated 2nd or 4th. And Park Center, our friends at Park Center, and by the way, they were friends, Mike Zechmeister, Todd Weiss, the boys.
We swam with a bunch of those guys on the club.
They were good guys. They ended up needing fast starts, okay, to place 2nd in the state meet, and so they went off. and they were so fast for their squad of 4 guys. They beat Edina in that relay to get second place in the meet by a 1.5. So that was an upset for them getting second, which we still talk about. I was talking to Mike Zeckmeister last night about it. He remembers it clearly. He had never seen the video until last night.
Really?
One of the dads had a VHS video he shared with us of the meet, and it's incredible.
What's the celebration? You're in that final relay, Don.
Wow.
And so Bussy hits the wall. The race is over. The meet's over. You know you've won it.
Only one big thing really happens. Do you remember what happens when you win? What happens?
Yeah, you toss the coach in.
Yeah.
And no one tosses Dennis Dale in.
No one does anything to Dennis Dale, but this time
Did you get him?
we threw his ass straight in the pool.
He didn't fight either. He was elated. I've never seen him so happy.
I think the quote in the paper is the best swim I've ever had.
Yeah.
He had a great quote that said, when you win a state championship that you're supposed to win, it's nice. It takes a big burden off your shoulders. But when you win it with a team that is not expected to win, it's more satisfying.
That's Dennis.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think
What an underdog quote,
it's,
right? That's why we love the underdogs.
This lives up to the Moonlight Graham thing.
Yeah. The favorites, it's boring when they win. But the team that nobody expected to win, that didn't have the big horses, that didn't have the coach that outsmarted everybody else.
I remember Edina's coach. I remember the Edina swimmers just walking around like zombies.
Yeah. They couldn't believe it happened.
One, they couldn't believe they didn't win. Two, third place.
Yeah.
And Park Center was over the moon. They loved it because they did. That final relay of theirs was ridiculous.
massive.
So you guys win the state championship that day. Huge, right? But then you have to scurry over to the hockey to watch the Burnsville hockey team win the state championship that same day?
All right.
Okay.
Remember, we had to reload our calories, so we went out for pizza at Valley Pizza. It's no longer there at the U of M. So we grabbed pizza with families and girlfriends and friends and sisters, brothers, and there is a state championship hockey game that night.
Right.
That our high school is in,
Right.
Burnsville versus Hill Murray.
So John Schmaling and I were the captains, and we were looking at each other, and we're so jacked. You know, we weren't going to sleep for 2 days. And he and I convinced each other that we needed to go over to WCCO and KSTP and see if they'd put us on TV and talk about, that we just won. And then we went over to the hockey game and got interviewed. Did you get interviewed?
No.
I got interviewed. But I know they talked to more than just me. But they, just quick color bit on the side, right?
Yeah.
Because it looked like they were going to win. And then after that...
And Burnsville did win
And
the
Burnsville
hockey
won.
state
I saw
championship.
that.
Yeah.
We had a twofer, which we've been told it's the only time it's ever happened in Minnesota high school sports history that 2 teams won on the same day.
From the same school.
Yeah, there was a rumor that back in like the 30s, a golf team and somebody else won, but no one can find the record. So we hear it's the singular event, the 2 championships in one day.
So does hockey, because hockey's a more prominent sport,
Yes.
does that steal your thunder a little bit, or does it add to the fun?
Wow. Okay,
I
hold
think
on.
it added to it.
We had fun.
Because
Look,
we went back to the school and they had like a pep rally that night.
yeah, by the way, they were favorites, all right? So they won. They were supposed to win. They won.
You guys
They
were
were
great.
dominant.
It
Remember
was-
the
it was
Okerlunds
like-
were on the team and all this?
Yes.
They were dominant.
It was, I think Scott Bloom scored the winning goal, but it was just icing on the cake, Tim.
Thank you for listening to our great episode about the 1985 Burnsville High School Swimming State Championship, our first ever swimming episode here on the podcast. Thank you to Don Appleby and Paul Jensen. Awesome guys, great moonlighters. And, the other underdog story that I want to talk about this week, if you've been following the NBA, and I do like to follow the NBA, I think it's just a really fun league to follow. And, we've talked a lot about Iowans in the NBA on this podcast in the past. There's been, less than 60 guys ever from the state of Iowa that have suited up in the NBA. It's very exclusive company. And just a couple of weeks ago, I'm sure many of you saw this, but A.J. Green from Cedar Falls, Iowa, became the newest Iowan to make his debut in the NBA. And what shocked me was we had never had a UNI Panther to ever appear in an NBA game. And A.J. Green was not only the next Iowa in that exclusive category to be the next Iowan in the NBA game. This year we actually have 2. We have Keegan Murray and A.J. Green. Both Iowans made their NBA debuts this year. But Green was the very first guy from UNI, which, I guess when you think about it, it's like, yeah, I guess I can't think of another Panther that was really all that close to making it to the NBA. Ben Jacobson might have been the closest one. So Green, he's appeared in 2 games. He scored a grand total of 3 points. He's playing with the Milwaukee Herd in the G League right now. Hopefully, he'll get back up to the NBA later this year, because if that guy can shoot it like he did at UNI, I think he's going to have a long, successful UNI career or NBA career. So that's our Moonlighter to highlight this week, our underdog to highlight this week. Always love the Iowans playing in the NBA. Keegan Murray has had kind of an up and down run of it so far, and we had AJ Green. Hopefully, he'll be back up soon. Have a great Thanksgiving, guys. Special thanks to the Moonlight Graham Show team with Brian, Brendan, Tommy, Andy, and Neil. Have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you, subscribe to the podcast. Thank you for leaving us 5-star reviews. Have a beer with your buddies this week.
It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. It's a pretty good program, broadcasting to the heartland. Sports stories for the everyman. It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. Please follow us on Instagram. You're loving us on Twitter too. You download every pod we do. It's Moonlight